Welcome to another Sinespace tutorial. In this rather short tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate why it's important to have the preparation of your furniture items and their orientation correct before you upload or before you send them to live. The upshot is that if you send them to live and the orientation is incorrect, or the placement is incorrect or awkward, they won't be approved. So let me show you an example of an item that is placed correctly. And even though this item is facing away from me, I can always rotate it to wherever I want in the room. What is important is that I can face it. It's sitting on the floor and it's upright, and as you'll see in a moment, when I sit in it, I sit facing the front of the chair and not off to the side or backwards or laying down on my back looking up at the ceiling. Another item that we have is a painting. This is just what I call an abstract impasto grass painting. You can see it's quite textured there. And it's laying on the floor when I place it on the floor. But as I move my mouse around trying to decide where I'm going to put it, you can see that it lays flat against the wall, which is what paintings should do, and also flat on the ceiling, should I decide to place it on my ceiling. Well, normally I'm going to place a painting on the wall. So I'm going to place it right about that height. And there's my painting. I then have one more item to just show you very briefly. And that is my round table. And normally my table, as you can see, sits on the floor. But just for fun, I have decided that this table can also sit on the wall. It can also sit on the ceiling. And I'll show you in the component what I've done so that my table will hang off the ceiling if I want it to, or sit on the floor if I want it to. It'll also sit on me if I want it to. And this is called snapping, by the way. It snaps to the ceiling, it snaps to the wall, and it snaps to the floor until I click it. Once I see the transform tools, I can move it anywhere. And it will move me around as well. Then I can rotate it, bury it, whatever I want to do. But when I first place it, it needs to snap correctly to the floor. Then I save my room, and I'm all set to go. Here's a chair that was already there. That's the one I'm going to sit in. Now, let's have a look at some of these items in our editor. And there's a very simple and very important way that you can tell if your objects are placed and oriented correctly. And we're going to start with the chair. This is the brown leather chair that you saw. And if we expand this leather chair, this actually is called, I usually put it in parentheses. If there's an E there, I know it's my empty. This is the parent empty, and you can see the blue arrow is pointing forward. And if you look at the transform components, the rotation is 0, 0, 0. So that's the important thing. The rotation is 0, 0, 0, and the blue arrow is pointing forward. Now, if you look at the leather chair itself, the blue arrow is pointing forward, so it looks correct. But if you look at the rotation, it's 90, negative 90, negative 90, and 90. And that's because I rotated this chair different ways so that it was oriented correctly to the parent empty. And I can probably take this chair and spin it Let's see if I can make that 0. Yes, I can. Okay, so now this is the way it comes from Blender, by the way. The X is -90. This is 0. This is 0. But if I changed this to 0, now this is the way it would come into the world. It would be buried headfirst into the floor. So I can't do that. So that's why the chair itself needs to be at 90, and it can be at 0, 0. Then the empty that I create, that I show you when I show you how to create and place animations in objects, that's another tutorial that I've done for you. This also needs to face in the direction a person would sit if they were sitting in the chair. But again, if you look at the actual transform component, you will see that there's some rotation for the sit object itself. Because you can move him around so that he sits correctly while in world, and I'm just going to Control Z to change that back. But again, if your parent chair object is rotated, he will still come in and snap to the floor buried head first. So if your object cannot be rotated to 0, 0, 0 and have the blue arrow pointing forward, then you need to put it into a parent empty so that the blue arrow points forward and it's 0, 0, 0. And that then is the same with all of these. This table is the same way as the chair. The table itself is rotated near 90. So I put it in an empty so that the transform component rotation says 0, 0, 0. Here is my impasto painting. And my impasto painting is also at 0, 0, 0. But this one is not in an empty. It says O for object because I've made the actual frame the parent object and the painting itself is the child object inside the frame. Now this I've made with just cubes. When you go up to game object and you create an object and you create a cube, basically what you can do is stretch and squeeze and texture, and that's basically what I did. But you'll notice that the blue arrow is pointing forward in the parent object and the transform component rotation says 0, 0, 0. So this is the one that you saw that I placed against the wall correctly. Now I'm going to show you one that is going to be placed incorrectly. This is also made with the same cube, but this one has been squished, scaled, transformed differently. I had it laying on its back. Now, if you look, the blue arrow is pointing forward, as it is with this one. So it looks like it would be correct, but the object itself is rotated so that actually the blue arrow points downward. Well, I say to myself, I'll just rotate this and then I'll make it my prefab. That should work. Because if you look at it, the blue arrow is still pointing forward. However, now there is rotation in the transform component. And so this painting, just like this chair, is going to come into the world buried face first in the world. And I'm going to show you that very quickly right now. So let's get our avatar back up here. And we're going to go back into the Room Edit tools. And you will see that I have this is called painting wrong placement. The image here, by the way, gives you some idea that there's something wrong with it because I took a screenshot in the prefab with the screenshotter. And this is the screenshotter, takes automatic pictures of your item. And if you look very closely here, this painting is correct, as if it were against the wall, and the images look fairly correct. This item, well, I could rotate it and put it correctly against the wall. But there's something with the images that might give you a clue that there's something wrong. And if we click on this object, pull it out, yes, the arrow is pointing downward, and so wherever it snaps, it's going to snap incorrectly. It's not going to lay flat against the wall or against the ceiling. And so that will be rejected, and they will ask me to fix it. So what we need to do is to make sure always that if we think our object is correct because the blue arrow is pointing forward, we really need to check in the transform component. The rotation needs to be 0, 0, 0, and then, as in this one, the blue arrow is pointing forward, and now we know this one is going to place correctly because it's 0, 0, 0. I hope this tutorial has helped give you some tips for getting your orientation correct. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.